discussion of the Netflix original series Stranger Things, episode 105, entitled The Flea and the Acrobat. I'm Adam Foxman, this is Mathis Coos, and you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit. We'd love to field any questions, comments, and concerns, and please rate us on iTunes as well. This is the number one way that you can support our show, and we'd really appreciate it. What's going on, Mathis?
Oh, not a whole lot. Ready to get into some sweet kick-ass TV.
Yeah, this was one hell of an episode. Do you want to just real quick kind of go through the whole Amazon type thing?
Absolutely. So the second best way to support us, the first best is just keeping up awareness through iTunes, but we have links in each of our podcast descriptions. Some of them may be to articles or things we reference, but mostly it is links to memorabilia and stuff through Amazon. So particularly in Stranger Things, we reference a lot of 80s movies that it kind of reminds us on and borrows from. So if you have a desire to buy any of those, buy them through that link, and we get a little bit off the top. You don't spend any extra money. It's just a way to continue to support us to keep giving you hours and hours of TV reviews. So that'd be much appreciated.
Sounds good. And hopefully the microphone didn't pick up the massive amount of clicking I just did right there, and then I realized, oh wait, that might be a problem.
I could have sworn you were actually practicing your Ethiopian. It was just like...
Jesus, dude, aren't I supposed to be the offensive one, and you're supposed to be the one bringing us back to PC?
Yeah, sorry. I forgot my role, yeah.
Know your role.
I think that's because I just got done doing a San Diego Comic-Con podcast with my buddy Dan, and I had to do the intro for the first time.
Oh my God, how did it go?
I think I may have said the number way to support us instead of number one way, but otherwise pretty smooth.
Talking like a court reporter.
Totally. Anyway, so let's get started. So,
sure.
Last episode, we saw Sheriff now knowing that Will was full of stuffing. He got the wire cutters and was heading towards the laboratory. And so now we see the nice sky shot that I think almost every episode starts with. Zooms down to the lab. Two white coats come out, and then the sheriff sneaks in as they exit.
Yeah, and then he's kind of going through the corridors, ducking into doorways when people are passing, and eventually he gets to a place kind of with those contaminant ceiling door things, unzips it, passes through. He knows he's on the right path now that he's passing through there, and gets to a door that has a lock where you need a key card. And as he gets there and he's looking at it, the security guy who gave him the tour a couple episodes back comes up behind him, gun drawn with his security officer. The sheriff says that Dr. Brenner called him. He's doing his whole playing it cool, give him the smile. Hey, It's me, the sheriff. And so the guy goes to radio Brenner, but sheriff punches him out real quick, which seems to be his go-to move at this point.
Yeah, he's kind of a badass.
He really is. Because as he punches him out, he disarms the security guard and ends up going through the door and shooting the keyed entry behind him. Yeah,
he's pretty much a badass here. He's like, hey man, Chief Jim Hopper here, no worries, right? No worries. And then immediately knocks out both guys. Little video game-like, you get to the door, you need a key card, so you have to go find the key card. He gets through it, locks the entrance, and then he continues to, explore. And eventually we get to a credit scene, but ultimately he finds the amber encased area, now kind of ashy and snowed, that we've seen in episodes past. So he's starting to get very close.
He's navigating the halls. All the lights are completely out. And at some point, he ends up walking to what was once probably Eleven's room. There's a picture of Papa. It literally says Papa on it. It has a drawing of her and a little cat on a table, which is kind of sad that she's drawing that scene, because didn't seem like it was the warmest memory that she'd had.
No, yeah, it's kind of sad that the little kid drawing, and maybe it's because it's the one time she resisted, and there's that cute little pet there. It's probably the best memory she's gotten there, right?
That's sad. But
Yeah.
So Sheriff ends up marching on, and the alarms start going off. He's getting a little frantic, gets to the elevators right as the security guards are coming up behind him, closes the door, and then, yes, he ends up in the room with the vagina portal into the other dimension. And it's glowing with energy. Sheriff is totally mesmerized. He goes up and starts stimulating it with his hands. And as he's there doing that, you hear this sound of something running behind him. And honestly, the silhouette running past makes it look like it's the monster.
It's the faceless thing, right? You're like, oh shit, it's coming up on him.
That's what you think, but then the security guards end up kind of coming up behind him, injecting him with something. Lights out, cue the intro.
Yeah, and then we get our sweet theme song. So, Sheriff's plot kind of ties up for right now, and now we zoom over to Joyce and Lonnie and what's going on there, because he showed up, consoled her, which seemed kind of odd to you, didn't it?
You're talking about the end of last episode, correct?
Yeah, so Lonnie shows up at the end, goes in, Joyce is frantic, they hug, and, I'm kind of like, why is Lonnie here? What is he?
Yeah, I mean, you're wondering, like, maybe there is some shred of decency left in this guy, because we haven't seen too much of Lonnie other than, the fact that he seems like a bit of an absentee father, and he's obviously kind of abandoned them. But in this scene, he hugs her, he comforts her, and even when they're in the living room talking now in this episode, they're tossing him back, drinking,
they're both
is what
drinking.
I mean by that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And she is just kind of saying, like, at first I could feel him, I could feel Will, and I knew he was alive, and now I can't feel anything anymore. And she knows that he doesn't believe anything that she's saying.
And they're sitting in front of the alphabet. There's that she painted on the wall. There's
the
lights
shot is
everywhere.
great with all the painted letters behind him.
And then as she talks about it, she talks about Will was right there. I could hear him, and it goes to the tarp, and there's just a blue tarp covering the giant hole in the wall that she acts through. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's obviously not buying it and telling her, like, long story short, she's going through grief. She needs to potentially get help. We're about to bury your son, and you're trying to tell me the body isn't real. Like, listen to yourself,
Yeah, he's saying, well, the mind makes up stuff to cope in situations like this. So, yeah, maybe you should talk to a shrink at this point. What else is there to do?
Yeah, and he also references an Aunt Darlene, which I don't know if that'll come back, but she says this is not that, so it's obviously a family member that has some kind of a mental illness or something where she was kind of going over the edge as well.
Certainly. And then in the next scene with them, Jonathan ends up coming home and seeing Joyce and Lonnie on the couch. He's immediately into kind of like defensive mode, looks over, sees the hole in the wall. He's like, what the fuck is happening here?
But it's interesting because I didn't really think about this at first, but last episode is the episode that Jonathan now is actually believing his mom. So he comes in and is like, what the fuck's going on? You're thinking he's going to be having the same reaction as Lonnie, because, I mean, at least I was, and then he's actually kind of putting some wind underneath her sails. Yeah,
well, and before he really even has a chance to kind of start getting into all that, Lonnie and him, kind of have a sidebar, and Lonnie's like, dude, listen, she's sick, stop feeding into it. Jonathan's just sitting there like seething. You can feel the hatred in his gaze that is falling upon poor old Lonnie here. And Lonnie's like, just behave at the funeral tomorrow, and for God's sake, take that poster down.
Yeah, it's not like the Evil Dead poster.
Yeah.
It's a little bit too extreme. But yeah, he really just wants him to behave tomorrow, because he realizes that he is having the same notions as his mom, and that the crazy is rubbed off.
Yeah, and, good for Lonnie coming in and taking control of the situation. Like, we're definitely thinking he's a good guy, grade A, stand-up sort of fellow, right?
Yeah, he is. He's downright dreamy at this point. I've really come around. I've turned a corner on him.
Definitely. We're Team Lonnie and Rape Face, right?
Team Lonnie, Team Rape Face. It's definitely character development. That's what I call it.
So the next scene that we get to, we're with the boys and 11, and 11's laying on the couch, still in her wig. They're in Mike's basement. The boys are kind of talking about what they heard on the radio the episode before, and then 11 interrupts them and says, upside down. And then Mike kind of has this epiphany. So he grabs the Dungeons and Dragon boards, the same one that she had flipped upside down before, and Other kids are not getting it.
Yeah, but he's obviously starting to realize that there is another side, and he's trying to walk the kids through this concept of a parallel universe. They talk about the Veil of Shadows, which you assume is from the Dungeons and Dragons mythology, and it's like a dark echo of the world. And then they start to get even more into the mythology and talk about maybe Ella's able to kind of cross between it and why
Shadow
she knows
walking,
so much.
they call it.
Yeah. So now we're starting to kind of get a little more exposition and description of what's truly happening here. Because we've seen Will through the wall, and the monster be there, and yet you bust through the wall and there's nothing there. So it's becoming more and more obvious that we're just dealing with parallel universes here, and what the context is, we don't really quite know.
And I mean, you say it's becoming more and more obvious, but at this point, like, I cannot imagine myself in that situation coming to that same set of conclusions, you know?
But I think it's also like I don't know, that's kind of the fun of it. Like, kids are more creative and imaginative and more immersed in stuff.
Well, and the Dungeons and Dragons kind of acts as the muse for all this.
Yeah, and it's a nice contrast because if you look at Joyce and how she's being treated by everyone, she is just a crazy person. Now, granted, these kids aren't voicing these ideals to their ideas to their parents, but it's something that they're pretty readily being able to accept, and it's kind of that, I don't know, childlike wonderment that might make them the heroes of this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly set up to be that way, and they end up going on a grand little adventure later in the episode. But for now, it's the next day, and Mike's dad's putting the tie on him. Nancy's mom's helping her with her dress. The dog that I think is Will and Nancy and Jonathan's goes and lays down on his bed at the fort, makes like a little whining sound. Jonathan rips his tie off because he's just not going to wear a fucking tie, I guess.
Yeah.
And so Joyce and Lonnie get up to go, and they get to the funeral. A pretty good little turnout. I mean, what would you say, like 50 people there?
Yeah, I mean, it's all pretty much all the characters from the show that we've kind of seen in some capacity, minus the sheriff.
Yes. And Dustin and the boys are not sobbing like everybody else because they know that they're still filled with hope at this point. They don't believe that he's dead. Although I will say Lucas, probably more than the other few kids, is having doubts about all this. But anyway, they're not feeling sad like everybody else. Lonnie's over there doing all the hobnobbing. Joyce is totally zoned out, and then she has like just that sad little flashback. Of course, it's not a sad memory; it's just sad in the context of him missing or dead. They're at his funeral, and it's her thinking about Will eating breakfast. They're talking about heroes and villains, and he's drawing this stuff, and he's drawing, I guess, a hero who's supposed to be shooting fireballs, and
they look like cabbages.
Because he doesn't have a red crayon.
Yeah, so she's talking about getting him new crowns, but it's a little sweet moment, and he's already at this point still very much immersed in the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. So it's a nice little moment, but I don't know if there's any more significance to it other than just kind of giving us a little more about Will.
Yeah, that's really it. It's like we talked about a couple of episodes ago, that these scenes, while they're not necessarily advancing the plot forward, they're kind of filling you in on this relationship that you only know exists because they're mother and son. But
sure,
they have to give you these things to actually fill up those emotion meters.
Yeah, that makes sense. They have an emotion meter, and they just have to fill
reference, I guess. Emotion meter.
So at this point, we now have the sheriff who is waking up, and it looks like he's tied more than one off in the last evening because there's not only alcohol but pills. He's got giant pit stains under his arms. Can
I just say that the pills looked very much like Tylenol and not like something that you'd be abusing?
Well, yeah, but Tylenol in the 80s is basically cocaine.
I think that cocaine was like cocaine in the 80s.
Maybe, but it's kind of like Coke used to actually have cocaine in it. Tylenol used to have linoleum in it. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Anyway, he wakes up, startled, obviously, what the fuck? And
he grabs his gun, actually.
He grabs his gun, he goes, looks outside. You can tell he is not buying the idea that last night was a bad dream after a bender. because he then immediately just tears the fucking house apart through a sweet-ass montage looking for a bug.
It was a good little montage, and he really tears that bitch up.
So we're 1 down, 3 to go for our 4 montage goal.
Oh, man. I mean, we could only hope, but I guess we'll kind of continue treading through this episode and see if it happened. He's smashing phones, lamps, ripping through couch cushions with knives, and he ends up finding a wire inside of a ceiling light at the end of the montage. And now he knows, like, okay, I didn't just dream this shit up. Like, I actually was there. And can we just real quick stop on the recap and just talk about... I was a little surprised that this was how they decided to deal with him. I get that they can't just make the sheriff disappear without having people ask more questions, but you've literally just released probably the person with the most authority and reason as a law enforcement officer in this small town to be looking for the conspiracy here. Somebody who has gone in and seen your deepest, darkest secrets. I just find it a little shocking that they released him back out into it to let him go about his business.
Yeah, so it didn't quite ring true to me because we've seen them just kill Benny without a second thought, right?
Why wouldn't they stage his death? At the same time,
he's the only one on to him, and he's obviously told his people around him, like the other deputies or whatever, that he's on this trail. So maybe they think just getting rid of him is only going to have now more people convinced that he isn't crazy. And they kind of confirm that when the other officers arrive and they say that they have what? Hello?
Hey, you can hear me?
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. So they kind of confirm maybe their mindset because they have the other deputies show up and they're talking about how they found Barbara's car, and then they also talk about 2 other people disappearing near Mirkwood, but they talk about like the job being done for us. So maybe he's not as convinced Barbara's left off, but I don't know. I also feel like, why didn't they just kill him?
To me, it like you said, didn't ring exactly true because we've seen the lengths that they're willing to go to stage deaths and to fake bodies. I mean, the resources it would take to make something that looked that realistic, even if it is filled with stuffing on the inside, I just think that it would be so easy for them to put his body in a car wrapped around a tree, with pills and alcohol next to him, as opposed to just dumping him back on his couch. Either way, let's not poke too much of a hole in it. I will just say that thought nagged at me throughout that scene a little bit.
Fair enough. So after this, what do we have going on next?
Okay, well, first off, like you talked about, the deputies ended up talking to him outside the house. Sheriff's acting kind of strange. They're saying that 2 other people ended up going missing, and basically he kind of just shoos them out of there a little bit, and as they're leaving, they're kind of talking to each other about how he is spending way too much time with Joyce Byers.
Yeah, they make the passing comment that he's basically becoming just like her, a Christmas-like crazy person.
Yeah. Now, there is a small little side scene that happens right here, and it kind of ties in with Sheriff and the whole bug thing, and it's Dr. Brenner listening inside of that sort of NSA, I don't know, observation type room.
Yeah, the little phone room with like the patching, and they've had scenes like this throughout the series, so they kind of show some of the ways that this group seems omnipresent, is able to kind of get to places and know what's going on, even though they're not at the scene where people are talking,
Yeah, well, and what he's listening to is basically a clip of when Joyce was talking to Will last episode.
Yes.
So he realizes, like, they have made contact. But I just wanted to bring that up because even though it's only like a 15-second little clip, it just, like you said, feeds a little bit more into them being omnipresent and really, I don't know, having their fingers in everything.
Yeah, so at this point we now see Jonathan and Nancy post-funeral talking, and they're just talking about going into the woods near what's going on, and trying to figure out what's going on. They've seen this creature, in the photos, Jonathan's on board, Nancy's on board, but she's also scared to kind of go through with it.
Well, they don't really know exactly what's going on. They just know that there is some sort of monster, and he wants to go out into the woods, and kind of near Steve's house, and she's like, then what? What are we going to do if we find it? And he says, we'll kill it. So then he goes into, that was Lonnie's car that he goes into, right? And where he grabs the gun and the bullets out of the glove compartment.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, he broke into a car and broke through the glove compartment, but I guess it would make sense that it was Lonnie, and that's why he knew they had a gun. He got bullets, and Nancy seems very timid and scared. But he's there to be the
she's
man.
like completely incredulous, but he says, like, this is the best plan we've got. Nobody's going to believe us, so we kind of have to do this ourselves. He doesn't want to worry poor Joyce any more than she already is, so they're going to go ahead and take this on.
Yeah, and we now see her in the garage swinging and practicing. So he's got the gun, she's swinging the bat, and then Ralphie shows up.
Wait, real quick, can we stop here on this? What sort of practice needs to be done in swinging a bat? Like, is that completely necessary that you have to sit there and take practice swings like 4 hours before you're going to go out into the woods to...
I mean, I guess baseball players do it, right?
I mean, yeah, but isn't there's... I don't know. I just think, like, you do that right before you get up to bat. I don't think, like, baseball players, when they have a game later that day, they're sitting at their house, practicing swinging a bat without hitting anything in their garage.
Maybe not. I will say, if you watch her form is fucking terrible.
Maybe she needed the practice. Okay,
it looks like
you convinced me.
I don't think she's going to do any damage to anything. She's probably just going to bust her ass, so more power to her.
Definitely. Okay, so you were talking about Jean-Ralphio, I believe?
Yeah, Jean-Ralphio Rapeface shows up, and he has a really heartfelt, sincere apology.
For any new listeners, that is Steve Harrington, by the way.
Yeah. And anyway, he seems like genuinely concerned. He wants to know if Barbara's okay. She asked if he got in trouble with his parents. He's like, yeah, but screw him, who cares? But he also obviously wants to go to a movie and hang out and maybe get a little bit more. And she's like, fuck no.
I mean, during this scene, he was not all bad. Like, if you took everything else that you knew about Rapeface and you just put him into this scene, he wouldn't seem like such a bad guy. Like, he apologizes, he panicked, he was a total dick. She's like, yeah, you definitely were. Did you get in trouble? Yeah, but screw him. And he asks about Barb. He wants to take her to a movie, the one with that handsome dude from Risky Business. Starts singing, just take them old records off the shelf. And she's like, no, not doing this with you right now, buddy boy. Busy with the family, funeral stuff. And he kind of just, he's very understanding. We all know he's a very sweet guy. And he walks away singing his old-time rock and roll. And she goes back to batting practice.
I guess so. I mean, and you could say that if you took this without the sum of its parts, he would seem okay. But I think there's a prior podcast where he kind of fooled me for a little while. I thought he was getting a little dreamy again, and then he just became a super douche. So I don't trust him at all at this point.
Yeah, you're a fucking mess, dude. You absolutely love Steve Rapeface Harrington every other episode, and then in the opposite ones, you're basically, come to grips with what he actually is.
Well, except that now I'm consistent, and you're the one that's falling in love.
That is true. I mean, he could definitely charm my pants off while singing the old-time rock and roll.
But if you remember last episode, there was a destroyed, ham radio. And that's really important to the school, so they should probably get some repair guys out there, don't you think?
Yeah, let's go ahead and deal with that. The principal is sitting there with them. He's saying, apparently some of the less athletic types go nuts for this stuff. And the repair guy just kind of grunts in response and walks back out to his van where there's another dude in there, gives him a knowing nod. They pull off, and the van says Hawkins Power and Light.
Yeah, so the implications here, and the only reason this scene exists, is to show just more of Papa's grasp and the feelers he has out there, and also to kind of imply that the principal is fucking sick in the paint.
He is sick in the paint?
Yeah, right? Isn't that like a term for when you're inside the three-point line? He's like the less athletic types. He's implying that he's super athletic and awesome.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that was a sports reference. A really fucking weak one. But
I'm glad.
Honestly, I feel like now he was definitely talking about you when he said some of those less athletic types.
Oh god, absolutely. I was so excited about how poorly that would land, and you definitely delivered on the response I wanted.
Please tell me you actually prepared notes with that line on it.
No, I didn't. I just kind of thought of it.
In the paint.
Sick in the paint, bro. Anyway.
Ooh, wow. Oh, that's good stuff. Okay.
I wish I had my soundboard set up with the crickets on that one, but maybe next time.
Yeah, definitely. That deserves a...
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Moving on.
All right, at the wake. We're at the wake now.
Oh, yeah, we are at the wake. And they run to their teacher, and now we get...
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, Mr. Clark. Teach, as Sheriff calls him, and every episode has a name, and it's usually pretty relevant. They have like one scene that it refers to, and this is that scene, because they are now asking about parallel universes, how that all works, how the Veil of Shadows and the things that they only know through Dungeons and Dragons, how does it really work in real life? So the teacher decides to give them the scientific kind of analysis, but he also wants it to make sense to kids. So he grabs a paper plate, a pen, and he draws a tightrope and an acrobat on it.
And not only, even before he goes into all the scientific stuff, he's very familiar with the term Veil of Shadows. It seems like he is definitely on their level when it comes to not even just the science stuff, but like the nerd culture kind of deal.
Yeah, and he initially actually just talks about... some other theory and just like thousands of infinite universes, and they're like, no, we're talking Veil of Shadows. Like, we're talking about evil universe where, you know, your version of yourself has an evil goatee.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The old doppelganger effect.
Uh-huh.
So he ends up grabbing 2 paper plates. He says, okay, there's an acrobat that can move back and forwards only on this tightrope, and he draws it out. Now, there's a flea on the same thing. Now, the rules are that it can also go forwards and backwards, but it's so small that it can literally pass through the fabric of the rope to go down. So, basically, he kind of, in a roundabout way, gets to, if there's a tear in time and space, then it could occur to create a big enough gate for the acrobat to pass through. And they're like, well, how would you know where it's at? And he's like, well, we'd know if that existed, because it would be such a strong force that it might even end up pulling all of us through it, black hole style.
Yeah, it would just suck us all into it. It would become a black hole. We should be able to detect it. One thing he mentions that's relevant later is he talks about the magnetic force would be disrupted as well.
Well, I mean, let's go ahead and get right into the scene where that's unearthed a little bit, which is Mike explaining the Mr. Clark's explanation to Elle, and Lucas wants to know, you know, where the gate is, and she says she doesn't know. And in the background, Dustin's playing with his compass, and he has some sort of realization, and you know, just give me your compasses, all your compasses. They throw them down on the table. There's like 9 or 10 of them, and he's saying, look, the compasses aren't facing true north. And he's kind of explaining to them that, you know, the needles are drawn to the magnetic pull of the North Pole, but if there is a more powerful magnetic field, then it can disrupt them.
And yeah, Mike chimes in and is like, wait, so they're broken? And he picks one up. He's like, well, do you see any electronics tied to this?
Are there any batteries?
Yeah, are there any batteries? So it's strictly magnetics. And then he goes back to what the teacher said about the magnetic, force being, the magnetic field being interrupted by such a hole leading to a parallel universe. So then he deduces that we should just go towards where this is pointing, and we're going to potentially find an entrance to get Will.
Yes, basically that's right. He says, you know, we can just follow the compasses north, it'll lead us straight there. And so now we've got like essentially like a GPS to take them directly to it.
Yeah, so the kids are off on their adventure. Once again, now getting a little bit closer maybe to finding Will. They've done some solid investigative work. And now we're going to Lonnie showering in the house, and Joyce decides to rifle through his wallet, and she finds a blue flyer for a lawyer. It says accidental death.
Oh my god.
So, she obviously looks upset, so you're like, you know what? Lonnie seemed kind of legit earlier, but maybe he's simply in it for the money.
Yep, so Lonnie gets out of the shower and she starts screaming at him, "You were here for the money!" And Lonnie doesn't really deny it. He's like,
we could use the money. We could do good things with it, right?
Pay for Jonathan to go to school. And she's like, "You're lying. You don't even know where he wants to go to college."
Yeah, where does he want to go? Wherever he wants. NYU since he was 6 years old.
Yep, and then she just starts screaming at him to get the fuck out, and he's like, "Well, you need me here," and she's like, "I haven't needed you for a long time," and then he really hits below the belt and says, "Well, look what happened on your watch, you fucking bitch."
Yeah, he's total douche.
Yeah. So he calls her a mess, and she says, "You know what, I'm going to keep these lights up until the day I die, if I think that there's any chance that he's still out there." And again, she screams at him to get out, and presumably at this point, he fucking kicks rocks and gets out of there.
Yeah, he kicks hard rocks.
Nice.
So at this point, we now go back to the plot line with Nancy and Jonathan, and they are doing some target practice. So Jonathan's taking a few shots, Nancy comes up behind him, and they begin talking a little bit, right?
Yes, and he does not look like he would be sick in the paint. His shooting is fucking terrible. It is like going anywhere but hitting the cans. Nancy ends up walking up, kind of playfully mocks him, and he jokes like, "I'm actually aiming for the spaces between the cans." He says he hasn't shot a gun since he was 10, tells this sad little story about Lonnie making him kill a rabbit and how he cried for a week. And so he hands her the gun. She says she's never shot one. Tells this weird little story about how her parents never loved each other.
Yeah. She goes into this like diatribe about her family being like the typical nuclear family. Mom just settled. They had kids. And they're both like, fucking screw that. And she has, and this is a real term, rather tight grouping. She nails that can.
Oh, okay. Is that what it's called? Tight grouping?
Yeah, I mean, if you're shooting at a target, you're supposed to have, the bullets in close proximity, a tight grouping.
Can I just say that the scene felt just a teensy bit forced? Like, her little monologue that she gave felt like that it was a bit of a non sequitur. I know that he had mentioned something along the lines of, at some point they loved each other years ago, or it all felt like that these lines were trying to get rushed out there. And to be fair, Nancy is probably my least favorite actress on the show.
Well, so Jonathan has obviously shown himself to be this like super outsider. I'm surprised he doesn't have like black fingernails, right? And he's made comments like that, and he has kind of like a few emo sayings. So I think it's supposed to be their bonding moment. But I think it was a real miss here that we didn't have our second montage where she put on some black eyeliner and lipstick.
Yeah, and they started listening to the Smiths instead of the Clash.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I just had to point that out because for the most part, we really don't have too many gripes, especially about directing or acting. But to me, this scene, those lines, it didn't ring completely true, and it felt a little, just forced.
I do think when it's all said and done, this episode will have our most gripes so far of any episode.
I think so. The funny thing is I actually loved it. I mean,
yeah,
really,
there aren't bad
loved
episodes yet, but this one, it has the enough things for me to like poke holes in it and say that took me out of it slightly.
Yeah, that's all. But so Jonathan and Nancy end up, walking through the woods together. She has the gun. He has the bat. Clearly, she is she's better at grouping.
She's sick in the paint. Let's just stick to that. Something, let's speak your language.
Okay, yeah, she's sick in the paint. Old Amari Stoudemire over there.
Is that a reference?
Yeah. He just happened to retire 2 days ago, so I figured I'd throw that out there.
Hashtag topical.
Yeah, so anyway, they're walking through the woods, and she's asking him about the pictures that he took. He's saying, you were this girl who's been trying to be something she's not, but in that moment, you were trying to be nothing but just yourself. And she's like, well, that's fucking bullshit. And she's kind of defending Steve, saying like, he's actually a good guy, and he was just kind of trying to be defensive.
Yeah, when he shattered your camera, he was just, trying to be, protect me. That's all. He was being a good guy.
And to be fair, during that scene, I mean, if I was her boyfriend during that scene, I feel like I'd probably do something similar. I mean, this guy was being a complete fucking creepo.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I would have just discussed his solid composition, and I probably would have had a half chub.
Oh, God damn it. Oh, man.
Hey,
can we please edit that out?
Maybe. But something I want to share, and I'll put this in the liner notes, but I read a pretty cool article where it was the person that was in charge of the props for this film, and for all 8 hours, they were given $220,000 to get props. So they talk about hunting down mint condition versions of the big walkies they use, the radio that they listen to. They talk about his camera and how they had to find multiple of them in mint condition because of it being shattered, and then also the telephoto lens. So it's kind of interesting how between like flea markets, eBay, and garage sales, this person, like, that was their job for a few months of pre-production.
That would be a pretty cool job, actually.
To find mint condition stuff from 30 plus years ago to ensure authenticity.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right.
But yeah, that is definitely cool. You should link that up on our Facebook page or throw it up on Twitter or something.
Will do. But this scene and the scene before, they kind of watch each other out because they literally say, like, let's build character and have them kind of, I don't know, commiserate with how terrible the world is. And
yeah,
then,
and they're finding common threads.
And then he's like, well, let me just throw this back in her face. And he does make the comment of like, look, I don't like Steve. It's not a big deal. I don't like most people. He's in the vast majority, but she still seems bothered by it. So it kind of leaves off there on a moment of tension.
Yeah, well, and he doesn't just stop there. Well, because they kind of go back and forth. She's like, I was starting to think you're okay. Maybe you're not the pretentious creep everyone thinks you are. And then he says, well, I thought maybe you weren't just another girl who's rebelling in high school who will end up marrying the guy who was a high school jock, end up getting a house at the end of the cul-de-sac just like your parents.
Yeah, he throws back all the complaints she had in her face from like the last scene. So it's like just a cancel out. I don't know. Meh.
Yeah, again, this scene didn't hold a lot of water for me, but yeah, it is what it is. The scene that I did like was the boys walking down the train tracks, which is very reminiscent of the film Stand By Me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've seen, okay. The shot was just a clear callback in my mind to that. Dustin and Lucas are kind of leading. They're talking about the compass. And Dustin's saying, like, the portal should be pretty damn obvious when we see it. And Lucas thinks that Elle is acting even weirder than normal. And so behind them, Mike and Eleven are walking together, and she has a flashback. There's a picture of a man that is being held by Dr. Brenner. She says, to the bath. He says, yes, is that okay? And okay, yeah, it is. Yes. So the next scene is her walking in this weird tan one-piece romper thing.
With like these little pouches on it with, I don't know if I imagine they're weights to keep her neutrally buoyant in the water.
Oh, okay. That actually makes a lot more sense. To me, I was thinking it was either some other sensors or microphones or amplifiers, something along those lines, but it actually would make more sense probably if it was weights.
Yeah, because she then has walked through, various hallways and things, and finds her way into a vertical round tank where she has kind of a clear, futuristic designed headpiece. It's kind of like an old-timey scuba headpiece, but instead of being
underneath that they put the EKG helmet on.
Yeah, so instead of looking like a bronze submarine type helmet, it's clear plastic, but then the rest of her body's loose, and then it seems like the entire cylinder of water is just covered in its blackness.
So is this like a sensory deprivation chamber?
Yeah, I think it's a sensory deprivation chamber in conjunction with her telekinetic powers, because then we see her in this black room right after this. So you assume it's some kind of training. So instead of your eyes are closed, but where she really feels like she's at is in this endless black room, and there's some person behind her just speaking Russian, I think it was.
Yes, but actually let's hold off on that because I want to tie that in a little bit later to some of the monster stuff that we see. For now, it snaps her back to reality, and her and Mike are still kind of talking. She wants to turn back. Like, she is now kind of remembering a little bit, obviously, about some of these moments, and really doesn't want, like, it's dangerous. So that's really it for that scene. After that, it's the sheriff just sitting there kind of having this sad, forlorn moment. He calls his ex-wife and talks about how he doesn't regret anything that happened. All the 7 years that they had was everything to him. She just assumes that he's drunk and pining over,
and he's like,
something that can't be again.
Yeah, and she asks if he's drunk, and he's like, no, I'm not. Obviously, you know that he probably is, but you also know that there's a lot more going on than anything that's happened between them. But then he says, yeah, I have been drinking, take care. And then he gets up like he's a man on the mission. The phone immediately rings, so she's calling him back, but he obviously just wanted to maybe make peace and say goodbyes because he is not abandoning this crusade he is on, and rips the phone out of the wall and sits it back down on the desk and leaves.
Well, really the impetus for that was he's talking, and then all of a sudden he hears the baby crying in the background, and then he realizes like that while he in his mind is still stuck in this last chapter of his life, she has moved on to her next one and has her new family now, her new husband, and her new child. And so he just basically tries to kind of seal up that wound real quick, saying, okay, I am drunk, I'll talk to you later. And like you said, he ends up pulling the phone off the wall.
Or maybe just the baby was so loud that he couldn't hear her breathing, which is what gets his rocks off.
Jesus Christ, dude.
It did not go through my mind at all that the baby was like this next chapter thing. It was just like, yeah, baby's crying. It's time for this conversation to be over. Cause
oh my God.
It just grates on me.
Jesus Christ. Well, let me just say that I am 100% sure that that's not what was the intended effect of that scene. That I'm just going to go with my theory on this one.
Fair enough. I'm still Team Sheriff. I'm just saying he's a complex character. That's all.
Yeah, hates babies. So basically, the next scene is there's knocking on Joyce's door. She thinks it's Lonnie, but no, it is the sheriff. He's got a note in his hand, his finger up to his mouth like a shushing sort of thing. And the sign says, don't say anything. And so he starts looking around, and he realizes really quickly that it's going to be a fucking bear of a task to start checking for wires in this funhouse.
Yeah, because even though he says don't say anything on the note and is shushing, I think he audibly says like, oh shit.
He does say something out loud to the effect of,
like when he sees all these lights, he's like, God damn it. So then he has to go, another missed opportunity. This could have been our third montage on what needed to be a 4-montage show.
Mic check montage.
No,
but it wasn't a montage, unfortunately. It basically cuts from what would have been the montage, and Sheriff is taking apart the lights. He's breathing super heavily, which shows you that the montage has already passed. He's already been searching. Yeah. Doesn't find anything. Sits down and says, should be okay, but I can't guarantee anything.
Yeah, so he has he's done. Did he find anything or no?
He didn't, but he does tell her that they put a microphone in my place because I'm onto them and they know it, and I don't know who it is, if it's the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy must sound fucking crazy to her thrown in with that mix. But to be fair, she is crazy, so I doubt that she probably gets hung up on.
She just goes like, that. What? She does a really good job in this scene because she has been battling internally more and more whether she's crazy or not. Because she knows it sounds crazy, and the fact that she's able to self-identify and admit that to people, I'm sure brings a sense of, like, I'm still sane crazy people can't admit they're crazy, but she also just constantly has people in her life saying, like, it's over. She just buried her fucking kid. So I think this is, like, the best possible thing she could hear to kind of reaffirm that she's not crazy. She really did see Will, and things are there. And then when he says the body was fake, I was at the morgue, like, she's just about to...
You were right the whole... He actually even says
you were right the whole time.
Like, that must feel like such... Oh my God, overwhelming justification for everything that she's been through.
I'm surprised she didn't do like a Jack Black from Saving Silverman, like a coming out of yeehaw.
She does give a little hopeful smile through the tears. Nothing quite so in your face, comical, and over the top. But she's definitely, very clearly you can tell that she is just feeling very happy about this. But the next scene is absolutely 100% taken from Stand By Me again, because the boys are now in what is kind of like a junkyard, like a car graveyard junkyard sort of thing, which is another scene that happens in Stand By Me. And they're kind of wandering around through it, and Dustin realizes that the compass is now just taking them in a loop. Lucas is really frustrated. Dustin's saying that something else is messing with the magnetic field. Lucas doesn't skip a beat, immediately accuses Elle, says she's a traitor, she's been sabotaging them all along. He gets right up in her face and is accusing her.
And then he notices some blood in her sleeve and is like, look, it's fresh blood, which is kind of the signifier that she's been using her powers. And Mike
she's not even defending herself at all.
No, she's not. She's not saying anything, which she's never, a gal of many words. But Mike is defending her wholeheartedly, but you also kind of see as the evidence stacks up, and then essentially she just says it's not safe, and they're like, oh god, she has been leading us in a circle. So Lucas is in, full douche mode.
Yeah, he's fucking pissed. He starts yelling at Mike about how she's been playing them, and he'd have noticed if he wasn't, so busy being wrapped around her finger, because it's finally a girl who doesn't think that he's a big old weirdo, and
that's not like grossed out by him.
Yeah, and now, so Dustin tries getting in the middle, but Lucas kind of pushes him aside. Nobody can calm this dude down at this point. He's basically saying that the Elle is going to let him die in the upside down area, and Mike is getting really upset. So Lucas and Mike start kind of pushing each other, fighting on the ground, rolling around. She's screaming at them to stop, and then she just kind of like the power explodes out of her. I don't even think she meant to use it. She just was so angry.
And he just goes flying and hits like a car and is
really
knocked out
hard on
cold.
his head. In that moment, I actually thought that he was dead.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they were going to go that extreme with it, but one of the things he says to really escalate this fight, where you almost think it might happen because it's foreshadowing, is we're looking for this monster, maybe she's the monster all along. So then to have her kill a kid, you'd be like, oh shit, maybe she really is, maybe that's what we're missing. But no, he wakes up, he's pissed off and leaves, and they are kind of in disbelief with Elle and what she's capable of, and maybe she's not as in control or trustworthy as they once presumed.
Now, before he ends up walking off, while the other boys are sitting there, like, kneeled over him, trying to see if he's alive, if he's okay, she has another flashback. Now, it's furthering the plot of what happened in the deprivation tank earlier. She's hearing voices everywhere. All of a sudden, she's in total blackness. And the only thing there is that Russian guy who was in the picture. So she's slowly walking up to him. He's having his one-sided conversation. She walks right up to him. He can't see her. And the sound of all this, by the way, of everything he's saying, is piping through the speaker at Hawkins.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And all of a sudden, she starts hearing the fucking growls.
Yeah, she hears the growls that we've heard every time this faceless monster shows up in the show. And then she just starts fucking running for it. And then wakes up in the chamber screaming and pounding. And, you kind of get a sense this is one of those terrible things she was constantly subjected to grow her powers. She's maybe tapping into another dimension, but there are creatures there.
Well, and I believe that this must be the genesis of all this stuff that's happened with the monsters, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, is this how they just initially make contact, and then making contact has opened up a whole other can of worms? Is there maybe some prior incident where someone else has made contact, and this whole project is training kids to tap into this dimension that they somehow already know is there? There's still so many things they don't answer.
The scientists and Dr. Brenner do seem to be surprised by whatever that they're. What is that sound? Just they do seem surprised.
Yeah, so you feel like this might be the first contact, or I don't know, it's a surprise of some sort, but they really don't give you a whole lot overall. And I will say I have been doing a sensory deprivation tank for like a year. I've never had a moment even remotely like that.
Yeah, I doubt that you'd be going back for seconds, thirds, and fourths if that were the case. I've always wanted to do that deprivation tank thing.
It can be pretty trippy. I mean, the coolest thing I saw was just like a weird obelisk in a bright blue sky with like yellow clouds pacing by, and then it opened up and it felt like I was like floating in the cosmos. But then other times you just feel like you're kind of staring into a formless void.
Yeah, I feel like that's all that I would end up seeing. Maybe we could do it together and we could lay in one of them together, or would that be really weird?
I don't know about laying. There's some, and I couldn't tell. I'm just going to terribly paraphrase the story, but the movie Altered States, is about a sensory deprivation tank, and I guess it's loosely based on some dude's research. But he claims that he let a friend go into the tank, and he could tell the friend was having like a bad trip because he also gave him, drugs before going in. And so that he got into the tank next to him, also took drugs, was able to go into the trip with him and escort him out. So we should try that. We should just both do drugs and go into tanks and then trip in the same dream.
What do you wear when you go in it?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. Can we not go in the same tank then?
That's what I'm saying. Like tanks side by side, not the same tank. Same trip.
Can we have at
different
least
tanks.
like one of those old school like changing room divider things in between our tanks?
Sure.
Because I don't want to be climbing into mine and look over and see your pasty ass.
Well, why don't I just get in first? Like, hey, I'm gonna go in. 10 minutes, you can come in, and then I'd already be in the tank.
Yeah, right. I'd end up walking through, and you'd be sitting there posing on top of the closed tank.
God, you always catch my strategies.
Okay, we've gone way off the rails here. All right, so let's just leave this whole scene behind us. Like you said, Lucas ends up, basically heading out of there, and Elle disappears. So now it's just Mike and Dustin there calling for Eleven's name, and we get to what ends up being the last scene, which is Jonathan and Nancy walking through the woods at night with their flashlights. She stops. She's like, "Shut up, I heard something." And they hear this weird little, like, yipping kind of sound, and they follow it to find a dying deer.
Yeah, so they see this deer on the ground, helpless, making noises, obviously wounded, and, it doesn't seem like there's any way out. Like taking it to a vet doesn't seem like it would do much. So Nancy gets the gun out, is going to put it out of its misery, but Jonathan kind of offers to do it for her, and they both stand up. She kind of shudders into his shoulder as he's going to do the deed, and then monster sound, and that deer is swiftly pulled into the bushes.
Yeah, and I jumped really hard when
that first happened. Yeah, I was like, oh,
yes.
fuck.
Yeah, and I was talking to Bethany about it, my wife, and she said that like it scared the fucking shit out of her too. But so they end up kind of following the trail of blood. It splits off, so they end up separated, which seems like just a great idea. Like,
yeah,
awesome, way to go. That is the way to handle this for sure. And so she ends up finding this weird hole in this tree with all this stuff dripping.
So ridiculous. It's like a sopping wet, gaping hole in a tree. Super gross. You just saw it scared the shit out of us, but you just saw a deer yanked into nowhere. You're following a trail of blood, and then she's just going to go ahead and get on her knees and crawl into this orifice.
Yes,
and she just got goo in her hair. It's gross.
This one did not seem as much like a vagina until she started climbing through it. Then it was definitely a birth canal.
Yeah, especially when she comes through the other side. You see the ash everywhere, and she's basically just like, covered in placenta-like gelatin.
And what's weird is like because it's the upside down world, like it looks like it's in a forest, but all the trees, instead of being covered with bark and wood, they are basically like these muscly, sinewy, weird, organic looking things, stalks shooting up into the air.
This is very much like the Silent Hill influence, full on. It's the same world, but just like kind of decaying and bioorganic and gross. And it also, this scene kind of reminded me, I don't know if you remember the forest in Nightmare Before Christmas, when you can go into each land, like, Christmas land.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
You open the tree really and you go in, and then you...
with, I could see that.
And then you go into the other side, and it's basically the same, but, now it's snowing. It also reminded me a little bit of that. But the tree is now closing.
Or Alice in Wonderland. If Wonderland was even weirder and more fucked up than it is in that.
Yeah. Allison in sinewy tree and like vagina hole land.
Vagina hole land. Oh man, that would be about as appropriate for children as Alice in Wonderland is, since there's people fucking smoking and tripping on mushrooms, and I've watched that as an adult, and I've allowed my child to watch it, and I very much regret allowing her to watch it. It is really fucking out there. How long has it been since you saw Alice in Wonderland, like the original cartoon?
It's been a very long time since I saw the original cartoon. I read the book as an adult, knowing that it had like all these references in it, and like I don't know, it's poetic enough to where it's just not like, and then they smoked crack or then they did LSD, so it's kind of veiled by its poetry. But yeah, it's definitely some adult content.
Yeah, I mean, there's the one part in the movie where Alice has the needle hanging out of her arm, and you know all the veins are all black and stuff like that, and you can tell she's like super strung out.
Yeah, that is the most fucked up one, because then like in her mind the trip isn't over, so she starts to inject between her toes.
That's true, and then she has to pay for it somehow, so you get to the scene with the ass to ass.
Yeah, it's so fucked up, man. That Cheshire Cat, always grinning, no matter what the content is.
Okay, so, man, this has really gone off the rails. This is going to need some heavy-ass editing. So she ends up seeing the hunched form of the monster eating the deer from behind, so she all of a sudden realizes, like, oh, this is probably not great for me. So she starts slowly backing up. And
walking into that weird hole in the tree was a bad idea.
Well, and what did she expect? Like, she found what she was in there looking for, and now she's like, oh my god, what the fuck? And like, it's all weird and muscly. So like, she starts backing up, and she steps on what I'm assuming is like a part of a dead body, because it's like bones or something brittle that starts cracking, and the thing turns around and bellows at her with that faceless thing opening up.
Yeah, the Venus flytrap opens, replete with shark teeth, and, episode in, that shit's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. She screams and runs. Jonathan hears it from the other side. He finds her stuff, but the portal, somehow he misses it, even though, I don't get it. The stuff was basically almost leaned up against the tree.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, and the hole is pretty goddamn big at this point, but it ends up sealing itself as he's kind of spinning around like a top, and so he doesn't see it, and she's sealed in there, and that's when the credits roll. How long
will I slide to set? They should have gone to the other side, right?
Yeah, I could see that. That would have been an appropriate song for this.
But, it doesn't really matter, because all the music in this show kicks ass.
Speaking of which, did you see the post that I shared on the Facebook thing today? I saw it on one of my friends' feeds, and
they're gonna do the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So I actually looked into it, and the composers are this band called Survive, which have like a prior album and a new album come out in September, which is pretty badass. So I'm excited that they're gonna be releasing this score though, because I definitely would listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly like something you'd listen to like going out on a night partying or something like that. But
you sure?
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe. Near where we live, there's that place Casadega. I could see myself going to Casadega, hunting for spirits or something while I listen to it.
Yeah. Pretty good mood to music. But otherwise, this episode was very exciting. A lot of cool stuff happens, but not enough montages. The sheriff not being just killed or disposed of is a little unbelievable, and then also some of the Nancy Jonathan stuff doesn't like ring incredibly true.
I mean, it was just a little. I rolled my eyes a little bit in some of their scenes. Sheriff, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm really glad that he's alive. He's my favorite character on the show. I had trouble. And it sounds silly saying suspending my beliefs or whatever. It was just very, I don't know. It just seemed like that was not in line with what we've seen from the Hawkins group so far.
So back to an earlier fan theory, I think it was from Kristen or someone, where maybe Sheriff's daughter was one of the experiments.
Yeah.
If that's true, then maybe Papa just feels guilty and is trying to give him a break.
Damn, yeah, that could be true. Shit, Papa don't preach. Right? Sheriff's in trouble, dude.
Papa don't preach because he's too busy being sick in the motherfucking paint.
All right, I'd say that's a pretty good note to end off on there. Again, thank you guys very much for listening. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit. Please write in if you have any questions, comments, fan theories, or even just suggestions on shows that we can do next. We're almost done with Stranger Things here, and we've already completed, or we'll be completing Preacher next week as well. So we'd like to see, what else could be on the horizon. So also, if you want to rate us on iTunes, it really helps us with indexing and growing our listener base. Yeah, I guess that's about all I got. What do you think, Mathis?
Yeah, that was another fun episode. We made a few references, so as always, check the description. If you have any interest in buying Stand By Me on Blu-ray, you'll be able to through our exclusive link. But thank you so much. We look forward to finishing the series out and Preacher, and we will see you next time, little buddies.